Bullies destroyed her dead mom's necklace. Her black belt sent them to the hospital. The moment the locket hit the cafeteria floor, time didn't just pause, it held its breath. Not because it made a sound, but because everyone in that room knew. They knew what that silver oval meant to Imani Jackson. And they watched paralyzed as Cameron Whitaker, Westfield High's golden boy poster child of suburban power and privilege, lifted his sneaker and ground it into twisted silence. The crunch echoed louder than any scream. 3 seconds ago, the locket hung gently around Imani's neck, tucked beneath her mother's old gray hoodie. 3 seconds ago, the last photo she had of her mom, the one taken just weeks before the chemo stole, her smile was safe. Now it lay shattered in glass and metal, Cameron's smug grin hovering above it like a final stamp of ownership. What they didn't know, what no one knew, was that Imani had been holding back every day for 3 years. 8 years of disciplined training in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Taekwondo, buried beneath second-hand clothes, tight-lipped silence, and the hard shell she'd crafted from grief and survival. She'd become a master of invisibility, navigating the halls of Westfield like a whisper no one cared to hear. But today, when the locket shattered, so did the final thread of restraint. Imani Jackson was 17, lean, quiet, guarded, her hair coiled in soft twists down her back, her green eyes always alert eyes that looked through people, not at them. She didn't talk much, didn't cry, didn't complain when the cafeteria trays accidentally spilled onto her lap, or when teachers turned the other way during hallway harassment. She didn't even flinch when Cameron's crew made jokes about her thrift store clothes or called her charity case loud enough for everyone to laugh, because Imani had a rule: survive, now escape later. She lived on the east side in a cramped apartment where the heater rattled and the walls were thin. Her father, once a music teacher, now a night janitor, worked double shifts to pay for her uniforms, her school books, and before the cancer, her mother's treatments. The locket had been a 16th birthday gift, the last thing her mom gave her before she died. Every morning before school, Imani would touch it gently. Not to pray, not to wish, just to remember. To feel connected to the woman who taught her the most important lessons: dignity isn't what they give you. It's what you refuse to let them take. But dignity had limits. And Cameron just crossed the last one. He stood over her now, 6'2" blonde curls, artfully tousled, wearing sneakers that cost more than her dad made in a week. His friends, Jake the hockey meathead, Trey the lacrosse bro, and Devin, who filmed everything, flanked him like sharks. Around them, 200 students watched, pretending they weren't. Some glanced away, most held their breath. They knew something was about to break. Cameron wasn't always cruel. He was worse, entitled. Raised by a father who owned 3 car dealerships and donated Whitaker Field to the school, Cameron had never faced consequences. He could charm teachers, flirt out of detentions, and if all else failed, he had daddy's lawyers. He bullied like he breathed, without thinking, without remorse. And Imani She was just another name on his list. Except this name carried a weapon he didn't see coming: restraint trained to snap. She knelt on the floor, eyes fixed on the crushed silver. Her fingers hovered just above the broken locket, as if touching it would make it real. The jagged glass face revealed her mother's smile, cracked down the middle but still there, still watching. "Oops," Cameron said, dragging his sneaker one more time across the remains, smiling like a boy who never learned fear. "Guess it wasn't worth much anyway." Silence followed. Not passive silence, charged silence. Imani stood slowly, her shadow rising across Cameron's smirk. Her hands didn't clench. Her voice didn't rise. She simply said, "I told you not to touch that." And Cameron laughed, loud, braying, mocking. "What this?" he taunted, holding up a broken piece of chain. "Come on, it's just trash like the rest of you." Jake chuckled. Trey nudged Devin to keep recording. Around them, students began pulling out phones. Not because they expected a fight, they expected another humiliation. Another clip to post. Another moment to forget. But what came next would mark Westfield forever. Because as Imani stepped forward, hoodie slipping off her shoulders, revealing a fitted black tee and forearms carved with quiet power, the laughter died. Not in fear, in realization. She hadn't been quiet because she was weak. She was quiet because she was deciding. And now she had. "You think you're scary now?" Jake scoffed from behind Cameron, stepping forward like backup in a bar fight. "You gonna cry little martial arts Barbie?" The laughter he tried to summon sounded forced, hollow. Even Trey, usually first to bark, stayed quiet. Something about Imani's posture had shifted, not defensive, not aggressive, but absolute. Her eyes were calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that comes just before a wave slams into shore. "I'm not here to scare anyone," she said, her voice even, but not soft. "I just want what's mine." She reached down, picked up the shattered locket. The chain dangled broken. The glass shimmered red in the light. She slipped it gently into her pocket like she was tucking in a child for the night. And then she stood still, hands at her sides. Cameron leaned in, inches from her face. "You're lucky I don't press charges for threatening me," he said through clenched teeth, low enough for only her and his crew to hear. "You don't belong here in this whole tough act. You're still just broke, still nothing." She didn't flinch. "You don't know what I've trained for." Those words didn't register until it was too late, because in the next instant, Cameron grabbed her wrist, maybe to yank her back, maybe to make a point, and his body froze. A blur of motion, a twist, a shift, and then he was on one knee, wheezing, gripping his chest like a fish pulled from water. Imani hadn't even broken stance. Her hands remained open. She looked down at him, not with rage, but with pity. Gasps broke out across the cafeteria. Devon's phone jerked slightly, filming the moment Cameron's alpha shield cracked. Then Jake moved. He rushed her with a grunt, arms wide, brute force style, clearly believing size and aggression could overwhelm. But Imani pivoted low and fast. Her shoulder met his center, her hips turned. And suddenly, Jake was airborne, crashing onto a lunch table, sending plastic trays and juice boxes flying. A freshman shrieked. A teacher stood frozen by the door. Devon lowered the phone and just stared. "Stop filming," a voice rang out, Noah Patel. The class valedictorian stood halfway across the room, phone still in hand. "No, keep filming," another voice countered from the back. "They deserve to be seen." Imani exhaled. Her fists never closed. Every move had been measured, controlled. She was working through muscle memory now, not emotion. This wasn't an explosion. It was a release. Trey, the last of Cameron's trio, hesitated. "She's crazy," he muttered, backing up. "I'm not catching a lawsuit." Cameron was trying to stand again, face flushed, one hand cradling what was definitely a bruised rib. "You're gonna pay for this," he wheezed. "My father," Imani cut him off, stepping forward. "Your father isn't here, neither is mine. But we're both still breathing. So stop pretending your last name protects you." Her voice shook then, barely, but enough that it cracked something open in the crowd. This wasn't just a fight anymore. It was testimony, because Imani wasn't just fighting back, she was putting something on trial. The whole system that let boys like Cameron walk on other people's backs. The way teachers looked the other way. The way money cleaned up every mess his fists or mouth made. The way a girl like her, black, quiet grieving, was easier to ignore than to protect. And right now, every eye in that room watched her say what no one else dared to. "I never wanted this," she continued, her voice louder now. "For 3 years, I kept my head down. I kept hoping if I was invisible long enough, you'd forget I existed. But you didn't forget. You hunted me." She gestured at the ruined locket still inside her pocket. "And when you couldn't break me with words, you broke the only thing I had left of my mom." The tension in the room changed, shifted. Even students who had laughed at her before now looked away, ashamed, or afraid of being seen in the reflection of what was happening. Then someone stood up. Noah Patel walked toward her. Not fast, not slow, just steady. He held up his phone and looked straight at Cameron. "It's all here," he said. "Everything. From the moment you grabbed her necklace to the second you hit the floor. You want to sue, good luck. I'll be the first to testify." Cameron's mouth opened, but nothing came out. The room wasn't his anymore. He lunged forward, not with technique, but desperation. And this time there was no calculation, no pretense. Just wild fists, spit-flecked rage. The kind of violence that came from a lifetime of getting his way. But violence without control is chaos. And Imani, she knew chaos. She had trained for it. She stepped aside at the last second, guiding his momentum with a smooth redirection, and Cameron slammed shoulder first into the cafeteria wall, his breath knocked out of him. He slid down, clutching his side, this time not rising. The silence that followed wasn't fear. It was reverence. But something deeper stirred in Imani's chest, not satisfaction, not even victory, just an ache where her locket used to rest. The fight was ending, but the story was just beginning. Because someone else had seen everything. Someone she never expected. And they had a story to tell. "You know they'll find a way to blame you," said Ms. Harrington, the vice principal, her voice a strange mixture of worry and warning as she folded her arms across her clipboard. "This school, it doesn't like noise from the wrong people." Imani sat in the administrative office, hands folded in her lap, bruised but composed. Her hoodie had been returned to her, though she'd yet to put it back on. The adrenaline was gone now. All that remained was the quiet pulse of consequence. Across from her, Cameron's father stood red-faced, flanked by 2 lawyers and a private security consultant who'd been flown in to assess threats to his son's safety. Cameron hadn't said a word since being loaded into the ambulance. But his father, his words had been volcanic. "My son is in the hospital with 3 cracked ribs and a broken nose," he spat. "And you're telling me this? This girl isn't being expelled." "She defended herself," said Principal Reeves, a man clearly regretting every career choice that brought him here today. "We have video evidence from multiple angles. Oh, I'm sure the mob has plenty of cell phone footage. But let's be clear, this was an assault. My client," he gestured toward the lawyer in a $1,000 suit, "will be filing civil charges. If this school refuses to act, we will." Imani looked at them all. Her palms were steady, but her throat was dry. She hadn't cried. Not when the locket broke. Not when Cameron fell. But now, surrounded by adults treating her like a problem instead of a person, she felt a different kind of exhaustion. Not fear, not shame. Just bone-deep tiredness. Ms. Harrington leaned in quieter now. "They're going to make this about race, about class. They'll twist your silence into threat, your skill into aggression, your grief into instability. This school will bury you if you let it." "I don't care," Imani whispered. "Yes, you do," she replied. "You cared when you didn't fight back for 3 years. You cared when you trained in silence instead of lashing out. Don't stop caring now. Use that." Noah appeared at the door, flanked by Sarah Hernandez, editor of the student paper, and 3 others, all holding phones, all recording. "We have statements," Sarah said clearly. "Video, eyewitnesses. We're not letting them rewrite this." The administration paused. Lines were being drawn, not just between student and staff, but between truth and the narrative power of privilege. Imani spoke then, not to defend herself, but to remind them what they'd all ignored. "My necklace was all I had left of my mother," she said, reaching into her pocket and pulling out the mangled silver shape. "She died before I could even ask her half the questions I needed. This was her last gift. He crushed it because he could, because he thought I wouldn't fight back. And he was right for 3 years, but not anymore." The room was still. Principal Reeves cleared his throat. "Effective immediately, Imani will not be suspended, expelled, or penalized in any way. This is an ongoing investigation, and we will treat it as such. For now, we'll recommend she return home. Temporarily. It wasn't justice, but it wasn't punishment either. It was survival." That night in the cramped apartment she shared with her father, Imani sat on the fire escape staring at the half-moon as her dad cooked ramen inside. He hadn't asked many questions. He didn't have to. He'd seen the story break online, seen her name, seen her face. And for the first time since her mom's funeral, he'd looked at her not with pity, but pride. A message buzzed on her phone. "Unknown number. I saw what you did. I didn't think anyone would ever stand up to them. But you did. And now I think I can too. Thank you." Imani read it 3 times before replying, "You're not alone." The messages kept coming. By morning, her inbox was full. Stories from strangers, survivors, students from other schools, parents, teachers. One was from a girl who used to go to Westmore High, one of Cameron's exes. She attached a voice memo, her tone shaking. "He wasn't just mean to you. He was cruel to me, too. Behind closed doors. Nobody listened. I thought maybe I deserved it. But after seeing what you did, I remembered I don't. Thank you for reminding me. Imani sat with the phone in her hand for a long time, not because it made her feel heroic, but because it made her realize how much had been allowed, normalized, defended, until someone had the nerve to say no more. A knock on her door came the next day. It was Ms. Harrington. She wasn't alone. Beside her stood Mr. Lennox, a quiet teacher from the art department, and beside him stood a girl with nervous eyes and trembling hands. Her name was Skylar Mason. She'd never spoken to Imani before, but now she had something to say. They did the same thing to my brother, she whispered. Last year. He transferred because no one believed him. I can help you prove it, if you want. Imani nodded slowly, because now it wasn't just about defending herself. It was about breaking the system that let this happen at all. They said if I talk, they'll release the photos. Skylar's voice barely rose above a whisper, her hands wrapped tightly around the sleeves of her hoodie as she sat on the edge of Imani's bed. The room still smelled of cinnamon from her dad's candle, the one her mother used to light before every big exam or bad day. Now it burned quietly beside the broken locket, which sat like a ghost in the center of her desk. Imani didn't answer right away. She knew that kind of fear, knew what it meant to live under the thumb of someone with power and no conscience. She didn't ask what kind of photos. She didn't need to. The bruises in Skylar's voice were louder than anything visible. Instead, Imani leaned forward. Do you know what it costs to stay silent? Skylar looked up, her eyes rimmed red. It costs you your name, your truth, your sense of what's right. You give up a little piece of yourself every time you let someone tell your story for you. I just wanted to disappear. I did too, Imani said. And then someone stepped on the only piece of my mother I had left. That moment had changed her. But this moment sitting with Skylar, hearing how deep Cameron's reach went, this was something else. This wasn't just personal anymore. The next day they met in the school library. Imani, Skylar, Noah, and Sarah. They laid out what they knew. Text threads, voice recordings, a few old emails sent from burner accounts, but unmistakably Cameron's tone, cruel, smug, calculated. Noah brought a USB stick. There's more. I pulled camera data from the west stairwell. It's grainy, but you can clearly see him cornering Skylar. The timestamps match her phone's mic recording. Sarah looked up from her laptop. We need to go public. Skylar tensed. They'll come for me. I know it. They're already coming for all of us, Imani said softly. The only difference is whether we meet them alone or together. They spent the next week building the case. Every lunch hour after school, even late into the night on shared Google Docs and encrypted threads. Students started to notice. Some asked questions. A few offered stories of their own. Most just watched curious, scared, waiting to see which way the wind would blow. And then came the leak. Someone, likely a friend of Cameron's, posted a heavily edited video on a school gossip account, just Imani kicking him no context. No audio, no mention of the locket or the harassment. The caption read, "When you let the ghetto out." The comment section erupted into a cesspool of racism, classism, victim blaming. Principal Reeves called her into his office. I'm getting pressure from the board, he said, not meeting her eyes. Donors are pulling out. This is becoming bigger than us. Imani stayed quiet, staring at the flag on his desk. Not the American one, the school one. Westmore strong, integrity, excellence, honor. What a joke. He sighed. If you release anything, I can't protect you. I never asked you to. That night they posted the real footage, unedited. 3 different angles. The entire lead up, the necklace breaking the confrontation. Imani's restraint, Cameron's aggression, Skylar's testimony. Everything. It exploded. Within hours, the hashtag, Justice for Imani, trended locally. By morning, it hit national news, but with visibility came consequence. Anonymous threats flooded her inbox. Parents demanded her removal from school. News vans showed up outside the apartment. Her father, already exhausted from double shifts, had to walk past reporters just to reach his truck. I can pull you out, he said one night, handing her a cup of peppermint tea. We'll find a GED program, private tutoring, something safer. Imani looked at the tea, at the hands that held it, calloused from years of labor, from choosing love over comfort. No, she said. I'm not running, not again. The next day, someone set fire to the dojo. Kim's martial arts academy, her sanctuary for 8 years, reduced to smoke and rubble. Arson was suspected, but no suspects were named. Master Kim stood in the ashes, calm as always. "They think they've silenced us," he said, handing her a small metal box from beneath a scorched beam. Inside were fragments of her tournament medals, scorched but intact. "But fire only reveals what survives," he added. Imani held the pieces, felt the heat still lingering. She would not be scared into silence, not when the fire had only burned what could be burned. She picked up the pieces and began planning what would come next. They burned down the dojo. "Now we build something bigger." Imani's voice echoed across the nearly empty gymnasium where folding chairs had been hastily arranged into crooked rows. It wasn't the community center or the school auditorium. They had denied her requests for both, but Ms. Ortiz, the volleyball coach, had offered the gym after hours, knowing the price of silence. 100 students sat there, most in hoodies and jeans, some still wary, others visibly angry. The video had started something none of them could ignore. But anger alone wasn't enough. It needed direction. It needed strategy. "Cameron's still walking these halls," Imani said, eyes sweeping across the faces in front of her. "Not because he's innocent, but because he's protected." The murmurs grew louder. Someone whispered, "Preach." Protected by money, by connections, by people who'd rather protect reputations than students. She held up the scorched locket, a melted edge of silver mounted on a black ribbon. A makeshift necklace now, a symbol reborn. "This was my mother's," she said. "They destroyed it. Then they tried to destroy my story." She paused, let the silence stretch like a drawn breath. "But I rebuilt it. Not perfectly, not the same, but stronger. And I'm not the only one." That night marked the beginning of the Phoenix Coalition, a student-led alliance of survivors, allies, and whistleblowers. They launched a website, anonymous forms, a wall of stories. Every account was verified, redacted for safety, and posted. And slowly, the truth about Westmore began to pour out, teachers ignoring complaints, athletes shielded from consequences, girls transferred to avoid drama instead of their abusers being held accountable. The ripple effect was immediate. One teacher resigned. 2 board members stepped down. Sponsors pulled their funding not from pressure, but exposure. Then came the national networks, CNN, MSNBC. Even a late-night host mentioned the high school warrior who exposed a culture of cruelty. But visibility brought new dangers. Imani's father lost overtime shifts. Customers didn't want controversy near their engines. Her car was keyed twice. The apartment mailbox flooded with hate mail, alternating between racial slurs and veiled threats. "You okay?" Noah asked one night, finding her sitting in the burned shell of the dojo, running her fingers over the cracked concrete. "No," she said honestly, "but I'm not broken. You don't have to carry it alone." She looked at him then, around the space where her mother had once watched her practice. "I'm not. Not anymore. They planned the rally in secret. No school permission, no district support, just student signs, voices, and one microphone on loan from the drama club. When the day arrived, nearly 300 people gathered in the parking lot. Skylar took the stage, first hands, shaking but voice clear. Then Noah, then others. When it was Imani's turn, she didn't bring notes. She brought the locket. "My mother gave this to me before she died," she began. "Told me to remember who I am, not who the world tells me to be." She pointed to the school behind her. "That building teaches algebra and biology and Shakespeare, but it also teaches silence, teaches that some names matter more than others, that some stories aren't worth believing." She unzipped her hoodie, revealing the Phoenix Coalition t-shirt beneath. "That ends today." The applause was thunderous. Cameron watched from behind tinted windows of his father's car. 2 days later, a subpoena arrived at his house. Civil case, student testimony, complicity. His parents tried to pay it away, but this wasn't about money anymore. It was about truth, and Imani wasn't backing down. The final words of her rally still echoed across campus. "They tried to burn us down. They didn't realize we were the fire." "Do you regret breaking his ribs?" The question came from a reporter, Sharp Suit Network, smile voice coated in performative concern. Imani had agreed to the interview reluctantly, knowing they'd edit her words, twist the truth into something palatable. But she also knew that silence let the worst stories win. She stared at the camera, then at the photo beside her, the scorched remains of the dojo framed next to the reconstructed locket. And then she answered, "No. I regret that it was necessary." The clip went viral in under 2 hours. Across message boards, Imani was labeled everything from a hero to a threat. Some praised her poise, her precision. Others warned of the dangerous precedent she was setting. But the momentum didn't stop. More students came forward. Lawsuits were filed. A state investigation was launched. Yet beneath the movement, Imani carried something heavier, the aftermath. Her hands still remembered the angle of each strike, the crunch of cartilage, the soft give of muscle under practiced impact. These weren't trophies. They were tolls. She started waking up at night, breath-shallow fists clenched. "Your body thinks you're still in the fight," Dr. Monroe, the trauma counselor, explained, "even when your mind knows it's over." "But it's not over," Imani whispered. "It just changed battlegrounds." On the surface, she was the face of a movement. Behind it, she was a teenager, trying not to drown in the echoes. Even her friendships were shifting. Noah had grown quieter, protective in ways that felt suffocating. Skylar was fighting her own battles online. Trolls whispered gossip from former friends, teachers who now looked at her like a liability. One afternoon, Imani found Skylar in the bathroom wiping tears with a sleeve. "They say I betrayed my own," she said. "That I sold out to the first camera I saw." "They don't see what it cost you," Imani said, passing her a paper towel. "They don't want to. It's easier to tear down girls like us." That night, Imani wrote a letter, not to the public, but to herself. "You are not what they call you. You are what you choose to do next." Then came the twist no one expected. A message from Cameron Brooks, or rather his mother. She requested a meeting. Not legal, not public. Just one conversation. "I need to understand what happened to my son," the email read. "Not from lawyers, from you." Against advice from nearly everyone, Imani agreed. They met in a neutral space, a church meeting room 2 towns over. Cameron's mother looked older than Imani expected. Not weak, just worn. As if she'd aged 10 years in 10 months. "I raised him to be better," she said. "But I see now that protection isn't love. It's control." Imani said nothing. "He told me what he did," she continued. "Not all of it, but enough." She handed over a small box. Inside was a note. Cameron's handwriting unmistakable. "I didn't see you as a person, just an obstacle. I thought hurting people made me powerful. You showed me what real power looks like. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want you to know I see it now." Imani stared at the words. They weren't absolution, but they were something. Later, she'd tell Noah and Skylar about it, unsure of how to feel. "You don't have to forgive him," Skylar said. "Just don't carry what's his to hold." Imani nodded. She wasn't ready to forgive, but maybe she was ready to release. She folded the note, tucked it beside the locket, and whispered to herself, "This story doesn't end with rage." Strength Master Okoye said, "Isn't about hitting harder. It's about knowing when not to." Imani stood at the front of the rebuilt dojo, the certificate to teach trembling in her hand. Around her, students from 7 to 75 bowed in white GI's eyes, wide with anticipation. This was her first class, not as a student, but as a teacher, a protector, a guide. It had been 6 months since the cafeteria. The scars were quieter now, but still there. And today she would tell her story, not with news headlines or viral clips, but with purpose. She motioned to the whiteboard and drew a circle. "This," she said, "is what people think fighting is about. An event, a moment." Then she shaded the space around it. "This is everything before and after the pain, the training, the regret, the consequences. We don't talk enough about this part." The students listened. Every word carried weight. After class, a girl named Mariah stayed behind. She was small, barely 12, with wide eyes and sleeves that hid bruises. "I saw your video," Mariah whispered. "That boy broke your necklace, right?" Imani nodded. "My brother's been hurting me. My mom says to be patient, but I'm scared." Imani knelt so their eyes met. Being strong doesn't mean staying silent. Let's make a plan together. They talked for an hour about safety boundaries, trusted adults. Imani gave Mariah a phone number, a way out, and something more, permission to speak up. Later that week, Mariah's mother reported her son. He was sent to counseling. Mariah stayed in the dojo, where she smiled for the first time in months. Word spread. Imani became a quiet force, consulting with schools on bystander training, testifying at anti-bullying hearings, organizing workshops on restorative justice. She didn't chase headlines anymore. She chased impact. Then one day she received an email from an unlikely source, Caleb. Not a legal threat, not anger, a thank you. I still hate that you beat me, but I know I earned it. I'm working at a youth center now, teaching boxing and respect. Imani stared at the screen for a long time, not because she forgave him, but because this was what justice could look like, not just punishment, but change. Yet for every Caleb there were others like Marcus, still clinging to the narrative of being a victim, still selling outrage in poorly edited rants. "Let it go," Skylar said one night as they walked past a newsstand. "The world sees through it." "I know," Imani said, then smiled softly. But sometimes the quietest lies scream the loudest. At school, she gave a speech for Unity Week. Not about the cafeteria or the locket, but about systems. How many of us suffered because the adults looked away, because silence felt safer than truth. The auditorium was silent. She continued, "I'm not here to make you comfortable. I'm here to ask, who are you when no one's watching?" The applause came slow, then thunderous. Not for a fight, but for a challenge. Afterward, a teacher approached her. "You changed how we see our students." Imani didn't respond right away. She just looked at the restored locket around her neck. Not broken, not erased. Reforged. Your silence used to protect them. Now it protects no one. Imani's words echoed through the city council chamber, where the walls were lined with portraits of leaders, past almost all white, almost all male. She stood at the podium, surrounded not by cameras or protest signs, but by young people in mismatched chairs, students, teachers, trauma counselors, even parents holding photos of their children. This wasn't just a speech, it was testimony. Months had passed since the cafeteria, since the rally, since the lawsuits, and today the board was voting on the Westmore Accountability Bill, a new school policy mandating transparency, external review of misconduct claims, and a student-led ethics committee. Imani was no longer a victim. She wasn't even just a survivor. She was a voice, a blueprint. "This isn't about revenge," she said. "It's about memory, about what happens when we decide we won't look away anymore." The room was silent. Then came the vote. One by one, hands rose, some reluctant, some proud, but enough to pass the motion. The room erupted in quiet applause. Not the wild celebration of a sports win, but the slow rising sound of something earned, fought for, paid in pain. Imani sat back, her heart steady. The locket around her neck glinted under the sterile lights, still cracked, still shining. A scar turned symbol. Outside, a group of students waited for her. Mariah was there now, taller, more confident. Skylar stood beside her, fingers interlaced with her new girlfriend's. Noah waved from across the street, giving her a nod that said, "We did it." But just before Imani stepped outside, she noticed something else. A boy, no older than 16, waiting by the stairwell. "You don't know me," he said. "But I was in that cafeteria. I didn't say anything back then. I was scared." Imani didn't speak. Just let him keep going. "I wanted to thank you, not just for what you did, but because I finally stood up for someone last week. It was scary, but I did it. And it worked. Because of you." She looked at him, really looked, and saw what her mother once told her people would one day see, not a fighter, a mirror. That night, she returned home to a quiet apartment and a letter from a scholarship foundation. Full tuition, social justice studies, a program named after a woman she'd never met, another fighter who refused to stay silent. She placed the letter beside the locket, beside the ashes of the dojo medal now pressed into a smooth stone, and on a blank page she began writing again. Not a journal this time, a guidebook, for the ones who came before and the ones still afraid to speak. Here's what they never taught you in school. And as her pen moved, she smiled, not because the pain was gone, but because the purpose was clearer than ever. Justice wasn't a moment. It was a movement. And she was still in it.